Hello there, folks. DJ Burgstarre here, back with another tip of the day. So, before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to Crafty Kename, who requested this video. And in this video, I want to just give an overview of mixing and mastering. And this is sort of for people who are kind of in their home studio who want to mix and master their own track without sending it to a mastering house. And let's just have an overview here of what's going on. So let's play this track so you can see what we're working with real quick. And right now there's no mastering on. This is just my mix. Okay, so let's back up a bit here. So we're going to start with the first track. And what you want to do as you're making your tracks is each track should have an EQ on it. So everything is in its own frequency range and you're cutting out anything that's not absolutely necessary to be in each track, because that will add gain and boost and mess with your master and muddy things up in the end. So I already did another video on that, so I'm not going to go through all that again, but you can see how each one of these tracks is laying in its own frequency range. Okay, so we're going to start with the first track, and what I like to do is start with an anchor track, is what this is called. And basically, this volume of the first track is what you're going to base the rest of your tracks on as you add them one by one in your mix. So the first track, I like to start off with my kick and bass. And let's play this. And this is just my kick. And what I like to do is set this at -6. And the reason I start less than 0 is because we're going to need headroom as we keep adding tracks. And when we do our master, we want headroom here so we can start adding those devices on our master chain when the time comes. So you want all of your tracks, once they're running, and this master to be in between sort of -12 and -6. You don't want this up at 0 while you're doing your mix, or when you get to your master, you won't have the headroom you need to put your devices on your master chain and sort of master this track. So now that I've got my kick running, we're going to add the bass. So the next track is the bass. Let's turn that on. And what I want to do is get a good level on this bass compared to my kick drum. So I've already done that. Sounds pretty good. Then we'll move on. I like to put on sort of the rest of the percussion as I go. So the snares next. I want to make sure the level there is kind of good compared to the other levels I already have. And then let's continue on here. So this is my clap. Get a good level for that. So my mix is sounding pretty good. And then my next track, the hi-hat. Sounds pretty good with the rest of my mix, the level that is. And of course you can see here that it's lying in its own frequency range. And then I like to add sort of the main instruments next. I have a piano and a synthesizer. So here's the piano. And then my synthesizer. So I want to make sure those levels in my mix sound pretty good compared to my original anchor point. And then I'll add the melody or any sound effects and things like that next. And what I do is I add my vocals at the last part of my mix. Some people like to put their vocals near the beginning and do that after their kick and bass maybe. But I like to put my vocal at the end here. Let's turn that on. Alright, once you've spent a good amount of time getting your mix sounding nice by itself, what needs to be done next is your master. And the master channel is where you're going to get the energy of this track and where you want to get it ready to put out into the world and add as much power and volume you can to this track without giving it any distortion or anything like that. And during this part of the phase, you can also adjust a little bit of EQ if you want. So let's go through my master chain here and what I did. Let's add these one by one. So what I like to do first is put on my compressor. And I don't add a lot, I just have a little bit of gain reduction. And then I put on my OTT, and this is a multi-band compressor. Basically, it separates the highs, the mids, and the lows in terms of compression. And in that way, when I'm doing my master, I can listen carefully, and if I needed to boost my highs just a little bit, or maybe my mid-range was a bit much, I could pull that back, and the bass as well. Maybe there's too much, maybe there's too little, and I can make some fine adjustments basically to my frequency ranges here. And so this OTT is a really nice multi-band compressor to use. It's a bit powerful, so you can see I only have it at 20%. You can use a regular multi-band compressor as well that's not the OTT, and you can sort of use that instead if you want. Then I move on to my EQ, and you'll notice I've boosted just a little bit of the mid-range here because I felt like it was lacking a little bit in this range. Let's turn that down, you'll see what I mean. See how it's a bit weak in that mid-range? So I pump that up just a little bit. And then the next thing on my master chain is this utility, and I put that on mainly so I can get this bass mono on here. And I set that, and so anything that's below what I set this to will be in mono. And that's just really good practice. I have another video on that. And it's just nice to have your super low end frequencies in mono. And that helps your mix in a number of ways when you're playing it in different environments, like in a club and things like that. You don't want to have your bass spread out in mono. You want it, in stereo. You want that low end to be in mono. So that's what this is doing. It's not adding gain or anything like that. Now, you'll notice over here on our master that we still have some headroom here. And this is good. We have some headroom in our master because this last piece of the chain is the limiter. And this is really where you're going to get that power and energy from this whole track. And how we're going to do that is we're going to boost this gain up until it starts sounding distorted or bad in any way. And then we're going to pull it back just a little bit. And hopefully we end up with a clean mix, but it'll be as loud and as energetic as this track can be. So let's turn that on and we'll start adjusting the gain. Still sounds pretty good. Now let's crank that too far and I'll show you what can happen. The whole thing just gets real muddy and smushed together, and it's just, you can't crank it that high. As much as you want to add more gain to this, it's not going to help. It's just going to make it sound worse. So Let's get back to where it starts sounding almost bad, and then pull it back just a hair, and that's where you want to leave it, and that's, like I said, as much power you're going to get out of this track. Maybe right about there. And you'll notice our master now is above the 12 average, but we're trying to get this as loud as possible so you can put it out into the world with the gain as loud as possible. So there are some other tricks you can do along the way and in your master chain to get this even louder and boost up your master a bit more. But for a track like this that's not that, EDM style or dubstep or whatnot, you don't want to crank it too far or it will start sounding distorted and wrong. So that's sort of a basic overall with the bullet points here on how to get a good mix first, have everything in its own frequency ranges, and then go to your master and start adding these one by one. And then as you're playing your master, you can adjust some of your multi-band compression potentially, or add a little bit of EQ here. This isn't where I would do a lot of EQing in my master. I would do that on each track if I really wanted some more high end on this piano or something. I wouldn't do that in my master, but I just noticed that this needed a little more in the overall mix to have a little bit of a boost in this mid-range here. And then again, that limiter at the end is really where you're getting the power and energy and maximum loudness you can get. So hopefully that's a good sort of overall of how to mix and master a track if you're kind of trying to do it yourself without sending it to a master house. So anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope to see you guys on the next one. DJ Burgstarre out.